We're live? Dang. All right, Small Axe Talks. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I'm here today with a very special guest. I have the honor of speaking to Mr. Anthony Ameen, aka Doc. He is a veteran of the U.S. Navy and served as a hospital corpsman from 2002 to 2010. And he also founded the nonprofit Wings for Warriors here in Arizona, which helps veterans returning home and assist them in getting adequate health care and financial benefits. Thank you, sir, for joining me.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate you having me. Thanks, man.
So if we can, I just kind of like to start out just with a little bit about your background, like where you're from, and then how you kind of got into the military, if we can.
Sure. Yeah. And thanks again for having me, man. Appreciate it. I was actually born in Clay County, Missouri, which is out of Kansas City, Missouri. Don't know much about it. I've heard it's cold and I heard the barbecue's good. I was about a year old when my family moved from there.
Okay.
And ended up moving to Midland, Odessa, right? Midland, Texas. And so I kind of grew up in Texas until I was about 8 years old. My mom and dad were, in pharmaceutical sales. And it brought our family out to Arizona at age 8. And so I'm 38 now. So for 30 years, Arizona has been my home. Ahwatukee, little city, a little suburb community outside of Phoenix. And Phoenix is home for me. And as far as like how I got in the military, really is my dad really had two careers. He was pharmaceutical sales, crushed it in like the 90s, crushed it. And was with companies like Johnson & Johnson, Biogen, IDEC. And when companies were like about to make a merge, he was in there and had stocks and all that fun stuff. So
wow.
He really was a great provider for our family in that regard. And kind of retired early from that career and always wanted to be a cop.
Really?
And so interesting. Like he had like a healthcare background. He had a psychology degree from UT. But then when he became a cop, he had a second career and he did that for some time. And, they always say like you kind of like, career wise, you kind of end up where your parents were in essence, or if it's an industry, it's usually the same industry. So then my mom, she was also pharmaceutical sales as well, and she was doing a great job. And later in life, my brother became pharmaceutical sales, and then 9/11 took place. So I know I'm all over the place. I'm ADD for all the viewers out there. I'm like a bouncy ball in a square box. Have fun. But basically where I was going with that is 9/11 took place September 11th, 2001. And just like the rest of us Americans, like I'm a patriot. I was pissed off. I didn't want to see that happening to American soil, attacks like that happening.
So what were you doing at the time? What were you doing in 01?
I was in between jobs. I mean, I was working retail jobs. I was trying to wear the community college hat. I was kind of a rebel.
Where'd you go to community college?
Mesa Community College.
Okay. Where'd you go to high school?
Desert Vista.
Okay.
So I graduated Desert Vista 2000, did, community college for a year or so, mainly partying, girls, alcohol, drugs. That was pretty much my priority in life. I was working at the mall. I was a mall rat. So
really?
Abercrombie, Mr. Rags was a store at Fiesta Mall for anyone from Phoenix from the 90s and early thousands. That was me. And then you've got Dillard's, Robinson's. Man, I bounced around the mall, man. I was a mall rat.
Which mall?
Fiesta Mall and then Chandler Mall. I helped launch Chandler Mall.
Really?
Yeah, that was actually kind of fun.
Wow.
Got to meet the Nordstrom family.
Really?
Yeah, that's where I was.
Interesting.
But where I was going with that, I was in between jobs at the time, probably in between malls. And that period of my life, again, the priority was on partying, and I knew I needed some direction in my life. And I think that's why my mom and dad brought me back into their home and said, like, look, let's get your head back on a swivel. And September 11th took place. I remember my mom woke me up. My mom woke me up when the second plane hit the second tower. And that was just like a brutal, raw awakening, like the words that came out of my mother's mouth was, we're under attack. And I'm like, what the hell, waking up from, a hangover or something and literally like rubbing my eyes being like, what? And so, not long after that, a lot of my buddies started to phone each other, and kind of like, hey, what are your thoughts on this? Are you going to join? Are you going to join? And so like, yeah, my buddy and I ended up joining.
Wow.
A good friend of mine joined the Army. He joined a little bit before I did. He came home from boot camp when you enlist in the armed forces, they have DEP or delayed entry program. So it's like a year usually, or 6 months to a year, where they give you time to get kind of grounded with the origins and the history of the branch that you're about to join, boot camp, physical, I can't even,
like
physical training. Yeah. Stuff like that.
Strength.
And I just remember I was on delayed entry program for a while, and about 6 months later, my buddy ended up coming home from boot camp, and he had a shaved head. He was all chiseled and looking good. And I saw he needed the same direction and guidance I needed. And so to see him come home and he's all squared away, I'm like, yeah, I think I'm making the right decision. And even years and years later, I look back and I'm so thankful and grateful that I made that decision.
So how did you get into the Navy as a doctor? How did that kind of unfold?
I wasn't a doctor. I was a medic, if you will.
Medic,
so they call us Doc. It's our nickname because we're the only medical enlisted personnel on the battlefield with the Marines or sailors that we're operating with, and a lot of times soldiers too. Corpsmen will mix with the Army as well. But for the Navy, for me, it was like in 2002. I actually swore into oath September 11th, 2002, 1 year from the day I chose to join, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think that was our nation's first Patriots Day.
Really?
I think so. I have to. Well, it's live. I don't want to look at my phone and ruin your show.
No, it's all good.
But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. And so, my recruiter actually, he totally oversold being a deck seaman. It was like the most glorified job in the United States Navy. And,
really?
All I remember doing is painting the ship gray, haze gray and underway. Yeah, man. I mean, I was a deck seaman. They call us deck apes, and you're swabbing the deck.
What were you on? What type of?
I was on an amphibious. I was on an amphibious warship. It was the USS Dubuque LPD-8, and I had a fantastic experience. Really, it was really like in the midst of it was a pretty experience because of I was getting yelled at a lot, and I was an E1 about to become E2 or E3. And usually when you're an early enlisted man and you have one of the lower ranked jobs, you don't necessarily get treated like royalty. Okay. You kind of get bounced around, and you have to develop thick skin. And I think that's what being a deck seaman for me did. I was kind of a hothead, always have been. And, the senior leaders at that time for me personally were the bosun's mates, and bosun's mates are known to be they're going to roughhouse you a little bit, and if you're rough around the edges, they're going to clean it up to their liking. And they did that, and I thank those guys. And, and at the time I looked at it, I'm like, these guys aren't leaders. They don't know what they're doing. But, looking back, I really am thankful and grateful to have them as leaders in my life. And they might not know it, but they were. I just didn't see them as leaders until after that whole experience was over. Didn't like painting the ship. Didn't like cleaning the ship, but that's mainly what our job was preserving the ship. And when you pull into to the harbor or whatever, and you see the little guys in their hard hats and they're pulling the ropes, I mean, that's what we were doing. Some of the cooler experiences from that was I actually got to steer the ship.
Really?
And I told my kids too at one point, I'm like, I got to steer the ship in wartime at night. It's kind of cool, Yeah,
it's crazy. So how did that feel, being in that sort of environment? Was it hard to adjust as far as being able to relax and sleep and things like that? I mean, is that while you're in that situation, I would imagine, because I would think that, I mean, you have to have, as human beings, we have to have enough sleep to maintain your sanity. So, I mean, was that hard to adjust? And did you adjust?
Sleeping on the ship, and most sailors can vouch for me on this one. It's very It's very comfortable. You can feel it rocking, and the pitch and roll of the ship, you can feel it, and you kind of it sways you to sleep. I mean, sure, if you're in choppy waters, it's not so fun. I mean, you're literally leaning and having to, chase after stuff that's leaning with the ship. And we had that experience a few times. It was pretty cool. But yeah, we have rotations, watch rotations. And so 4 to 6 hours, sometimes 8 hours. Like guys will rotate, and then they allow the other person to get that sleep, that beauty sleep. And I remember we used to fight over the showers, and on a ship that's only large enough for, I don't know the exact number, let's say 1,000, maybe 1,200 people, right? 500 or 600 are Marines that we're taking from, let's say, Camp Pendleton out to, the Persian Gulf or North Arabian Sea, dropping them off to let them fight. Then we do figure eights in the ocean, doing what we do and operating in the ocean while they operate on land. And then when they're ready to get picked up, we literally go and pick them up and then bring them back stateside.
Wow.
It's a whole operation, and yes, it was pretty cool. And just to answer your question, yeah, sleep is really important. And there were times though where you had to stay up and you weren't allowed that. You weren't permitted sleep.
So what was your experience being, around, whatever, Iraq, Afghanistan, in that span of time you were in service? I mean, what was do you feel like because I was just looking at we'll bring this up later, the Wings for Warriors, their Twitter page, and they had some, tweet up top that was pinned. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, but it was just talking about our whole, involvement in that area and what that has amounted to over time and what we've been doing over there. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm glad the team pinned it. It's important. It's the Afghanistan papers. And basically what that was about was talking about how a lot of our leadership and I try not to get political. Look at you. Look at you.
We don't have to get political.
Pulling a fast one on me. Without getting my political concern out, I'll just say it like this. We've been in Afghanistan way too freaking long, man. And it's a very political reason as to why. If you were to read the Washington Post, was it the Washington Post one you're referring to?
I want to say yes, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I'm not either.
Yeah.
Because we do pin things from time to time that we want the viewers and the supporters of Wings for Warriors to see. And so I think recently what he's referring to is the Afghanistan papers. I'm not sure on the site of the source, but I do believe they pinned a tweet that was important for people, Americans, patriots, to see that there's been a lot of hidden evidence as to what's actually going on in Afghanistan and why it's taking 18, 19 years. It's ridiculous. And so if you were to ask me, which you didn't, but I'll ask it for you, what would I like to see change? I'd like to end the war in Afghanistan, bring our troops home and protect our homeland as much as we can. I do understand that that war is necessary and conflicts are necessary to a certain degree. Afghanistan is way too freaking long. It's just way too long. So I'll stop that one there.
Okay, yeah. I don't want to go down this route, but I think
Sure.
that's kind of a lot. If people are familiar with Tulsi Gabbard, I think that's kind of a similar stance that she has. But anyways, so can we talk about a little bit about your experience in getting injured in combat and just what kind of psychological effect that had on you when you came back and how that was, because you seemed like you're like so relaxed and like chill. I mean, like how was that when you came back? I mean, I'm sure there was a massive adjustment to get to where you are now. What was that like?
Sure. I don't mind to go back to an Afghanistan conversation. Let's go back to Afghanistan. I just don't want to talk about the politics of the war and stuff. No. But if you were to ask me what would I like to see and what would a lot of Americans like to see in military, I think it would just be important that we end the war sometime soon.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
But my experiences in Afghanistan, and this is 11 years ago, back in April of 2008, I was operating as a corpsman, a hospital corpsman with the United States Navy. There's two departments. There's the women's department and there's the men's department. A lot of times Marines, if you ask them, they'll say that the Navy is the women's department and that the Marine Corps is the men's department of the Navy.
That's hilarious.
Just saying it out there. I'll give it to the jarheads. I'll give it to them. It is a pretty good joke, but they have like usually they'll have the religious petty officers. So you have people that have religious backgrounds that will go out there and it be embedded with the troops, be embedded with soldiers, right? And Marine units. And so it's usually the RPs and the HMs, the corpsmen. And I was a corpsman, and I was honored to be with 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, 1st Marine Division. In April of 2008, we pushed out to Kandahar Air Station out there in Afghanistan. And then really the next 4 to 5 months was being embedded with these thick-skulled, battle-hardened Marines that just got back from Iraq. And the deployment just 1 year prior, I think they had lost 10 guys. And so they were already kind of, they were combat ready. They were ready to go out there and get some because they had just lost some of their guys from the last deployment they were on. So it kind of fed them the fuel that they needed to go out there and fight. And that's exactly what we did, man. I mean, we handed it to the enemy and they handed it right back to us. It's a game of chess, but it's a real life game, and the realities of war and the realities of conflict are brutal. They're gruesome. They're things that, anyone from 19 to 37 don't want to see. A lot of these guys are fathers, brothers, and husbands, and they're over on the other side of the world fighting in a war or conflict that, sure, they signed up for it, but the realities of war and conflict, they don't necessarily train you for. For me as a corpsman, they do, because it's good for us to be able to act on our A game, keep our head on a swivel when we see someone get blown up, literally get blown up. How are you going to react to seeing somebody's limbs all over the place? How are you going to pick it up, put it in a body bag or them, and bring them home, which actually occurred, right? So we ultimately, as a unit and as corpsmen, we had to prepare ourselves daily to see the worst, the very, very worst. And unfortunately, that particular deployment, we saw the worst quite a bit. It wasn't the worst deployment that anyone's seen, but it was definitely not the easiest.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really in the middle. It's more on the latter. Ultimately, our unit, 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, we ended up losing as a battalion. You're looking at, I think it was 19 Marines, 1 sailor, which is another hospital corpsman buddy of mine. And then you've got 1 interpreter, an Afghan interpreter. Hour-long firefights, lots of explosions, mortars, machine gun fire, small arms fire. I mean, it was going on constantly. And when I was talking about watches and being relieved and stuff like that, a lot of times my particular group was the QRF, Quick Reaction Force. So like we were sleeping with our rifles, wearing our boots,
Really? Wow.
and like, at a moment's notice had to hop out of bed and like get to it, get in the Humvee, get dropped off and go start fighting. And so that was a lot of the memories that I have was, eating chow, trying to get rest, cleaning my rifle, fighting a lot, walking a lot, patrolling a lot, being mounted a lot, and just being surrounded by battle-hardened Marines that were just ready to get some. And my job, my main focus was, are their minds right? Are their hearts right? And are their bodies right? And if you got all that right, they're ready to fight, And on July 21st, 2008, I ended up being called over the radio to help give a Polis litter to one of our Marines that was across the battlefield that just sat on an IED. And you got to think, for the most part, this guy, I wouldn't call it complacency. I would just call it, look, we were tired, man. It was a long morning, and we were kind of pinned up for a little while waiting for God's timing on some things and just the logistical timing of it all. And one of our guys sat right down on an IED, and it was really the corpsman, our job to render medical aid to him. And so one of our corpsmen was able to render medical attention to him right away, was able to give him an airway procedure, and then kind of revived him for a short bit. And then it was ultimately this corpsman needed help. So he called over the radio for more backup. And so that was me and a small little team behind me of Marines. In front of me was a minesweeper. We're running across the battlefield, literally, till we were told to take a pause. And as we took a pause, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, they ended up dropping a 500-pound bomb right where the enemy was, right where we were fighting. And just that ripple effect of the shock wave right below your feet. And once that passed us, we were told to go, 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 go. And not long after that, all I remember is boom. Oof. And that's when I stepped on an IED. There was a pressure plate IED, and I'm not sure like which way the blast went, but according to my injuries, I was holding the rifle, nearly lost these 2 fingers. My weapon pretty much disintegrated and fell into bits.
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy hell.
My machine gun.
Yeah.
And then, so basically I lost this leg like the boot basically got blown, and it was still intact, but like everything inside was just mush, and I knew it. As a corpsman, I knew I was an amputee right off the bat.
Really?
My right leg was shattered between the ankle and the kneecap. And so the best way I've ever described it this last decade to people when they ask is like my right leg was a wet noodle. Oof. It was just kind of flopping.
Yeah.
And the cool thing, and you're like, what can be cool about this? The cool thing is that I was able to coach my Marines and other sailors that were out there with us on life-saving skills and what you're going to do. If you don't know how to treat their wound, let's hope to God you can treat their pain. And so all of the guys have these little packs on them that have morphine inside.
Really? Okay.
And so every Marine that came my way that was helping me with tourniquets and everything, they kept just pounding me with morphine. And so I got a lot of morphine that morning, thank God. But aside from that, it was a pretty shitty experience. I would never lie or sugarcoat it to you or anyone. The majority of pain that I felt was in my right leg, even though, the blast nearly took off my boot. You're asking about coming home.
Yeah. So where after that happened?
Yeah.
Where did
So
you go?
To fast forward through all of that. I'm sorry, man. Sometimes
I love it.
But yeah, so surgeries and everything else. So you're looking at 34 surgeries, mainly to save my right leg from amputation. This one was already amputated. And and I'm sorry to go there. I had to kind of go there for the listeners and the viewers because I want to make sure that they understand it wasn't just like I just went to a deployment and came home. Like there was some we had to go through. And so long story short, I came home broken to a broken healthcare system. And sure, I was going through my surgeries and going through my treatments and therapies, learning how to walk on a prosthetic leg.
This was like around 08, right? 2008 or no? Later?
Yeah, so like 08's when the deployment was, and I only saw half of the deployment because I got hurt in the middle of it. And then so the rest of the time my guys were out there fighting in Afghanistan, I was fighting in a recovery back home. And that was really hard for me because I knew that these Marines were going to go in and day out up against the enemy, some of which might not come home, some of which are going to come home wounded and they don't have their doc. So that was really hard for me to go through my own recovery, knowing that across the world, somewhere in Afghanistan, my Marines need me. I don't know if you want to call it survivor's guilt, but that really was a hard thing to wrestle with.
Really?
Another thing that was hard to wrestle with is that Marine that I was running to save didn't come home. And it actually turns out he had passed next to me on the helicopter. I didn't find out until years and years later. So yeah, coming home broken to a broken healthcare system, being the healthcare guy that I was, and I wouldn't say disgruntled, but I was a patient that wasn't an easy patient for the other hospital corpsmen, nurses, and medical providers.
Where were you?
The first year and a half of recovery was out in Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, Texas.
Okay.
And then the second year was in Balboa Navy Medical Center out in San Diego.
Okay.
And again, 34 surgeries, and was wrongfully denied some of my benefits from the U.S. government that I just lost a leg for and just lost buddies for. And I was pissed off, rightfully so. Yeah. And I wanted to do something about it. So I took Social Security Administration to a congressional level hearing, wore shorts on the way in, won flat out, and they gave me a huge amount of back pay. At that age, 27, 28 years of age, I didn't know what to do with all that money. So of course it sat in my savings for a little while. Christmas of 2010, I had this idea, talking with my father at a Christmas dinner. And I'm like, I had this idea to start a charity to help other veterans secure their benefits. And through therapy, physical therapy and occupational therapy, other veterans started word of mouth hearing about what I had done to navigate through the system. And they started referring to me or labeling me as the benefits guy. And so from that point forward, I guess Wings for Warriors was born.
So what was it about the healthcare system that you found that was not helping veterans the way it should be? And has that changed?
It
Have
has.
things?
So for the longest time, they weren't helping veterans secure their benefits. So basically, you're spoon fed while you're in. When you're out, you're done. They literally cut the umbilical cord, so to speak, and you're on your own.
Really?
And so, when you're in, you get three warm meals. You don't have to pay rent. And so, like, when you get out, you're like, okay, I got to eat. How am I going to do that? I've got to pay some bills. How do I do that? And so I think that there's one disadvantage back in like 08, 09 getting out, and probably previous generations of veterans as well. But on or around that time, benefits was a big problem. And if you were to look at headlines from 2008 to about 2014, 15, it's all been about benefits, the backlog, and just hundreds of thousands, if closer to 1 million veterans across the country that are without their benefits. And then
That's crazy.
that's why Wings for Warriors was so impactful with what we've done. We helped 5,000 veterans secure benefits across the country.
Wow.
We've done a lot more than that, but that was one of the things that we were doing. But of course, here we are helping veterans in transition, military families and caregivers, but we ourselves are going through a transition because the trends of the military community are constantly changing. So what we as an organization try to do is change with those trends. So we're currently going through a little transition right now because benefits aren't necessarily right now as needed as they were, let's say, a handful of years ago. So we're trying to kind of figure out what are the needs of the community and how can we be impactful as an organization.
That's awesome. What about like psychologically? Or psychological help? Is there anything out there? Like, how was it for you? I mean, is there anything that you did specifically that you found to be very helpful? I mean, did you get into like self-help type stuff, or what was it? How did you get to be the person you are right now?
Great questions. Just thinking for a second. When I first got out, I was not as chill as I might appear now. So Christianity, getting my faith back with God, was a huge, huge part. I would say one of the biggest. Okay. Right. But until I found that, I was still a little ornery and arrogant and pissed off at God. And I talk about that a lot when I do keynotes and stuff. I was angry at God for rightful reasons. I lost friends on the battlefield. I lost a leg. I had PTSD, and I'm a different person than I knew, than I was known to be from before all that and all those experiences. I dabbled in transcendental meditation.
Really?
That helped a little bit. I kind of shut out the noise a little bit. I dabbled in alcohol. That wasn't good. I dabbled in, and I will be an advocate for this. I dabbled in medical marijuana when I first came home, and I legally obtained my card here in the state of Arizona. And I did it for chronic limb pain on my right leg because of all the surgeries that leg had to go through. And then I also did it for a little bit of PTSD.
Do you still use?
No, I mean, that was 10 years ago.
Oh, okay.
But I did it when I first got out and before I actually became a veteran with the Veterans Affairs. Once you enroll with the Veterans Affairs, I think they're getting a little looser with the standards of medical cannabis. And I hope to God that they actually do lean towards that for all vets coming home with mental health illnesses and PTSD and traumatic brain injury is another one that medical cannabis can treat along with chronic pain. But chronic pain and PTSD for me personally is what I used it for, just for like maybe a year. And then I felt like I didn't necessarily need it anymore. But again, getting back to Christ and my relationship with God and my faith, on the battlefield, I was probably closest to God than I've ever been. I don't expect you to understand that, but I think any combat vet with any kind of faith can attest to that. So losing that for a handful of years was really difficult. The corpsman that called me over the radio that needed my help, that I ran to help assist on July 21st, 2008, I bumped into him May 2014, and I saw that he had God in his life again. And something sparked or maybe planted a seed in my heart to maybe check that out as an outlet to see if that'll take me anywhere and calm me down any. Yeah. And I am now 11 years later able to look at that IED that was in between both of us as a blessing in disguise. My entire life has been blessed as a result of all of that muck that happened in Afghanistan. It just took a long time for me to realize it and change my perspective.
That's crazy. Wow. So this is all something I've always wondered too, because I haven't talked to like personally a lot of veterans, but I would imagine when you're in that environment, that's like the pinnacle of like being alive, you know? I mean, as far as like you're in the moment, you have to be in the moment. And it's like, not that it's fun, but it's like exciting. I would imagine for some people, they get addicted maybe to that sort of excitement. So how do you come back and like, because I would imagine it would be so like life would seem so like mundane and like trivial when you come back here. And it's like, how do you get to be like, cause you seem like a pretty passionate guy. Like, was that hard to transition into something, you know, this Wings for Warriors, like you founded that to like find things that you were passionate about and like to put that excitement into, you know, these endeavors?
That's a beautiful way of wording it. Honestly, that's wordsmithing right there at its best. I've really never heard anyone say it quite like that. So kudos. But,
Thank you.
I think a lot for the younger generation of veterans that experience that aliveness that you just mentioned, I think it's probably harder for them than it is the older veterans, the ones that don't have kids, that aren't married, that don't have families. I think it's the young. I mean, I think it's those veterans that come home and it's really hard to make the transition from combat to civilian life. I think for the families, for the ones that have families or spouses, they have something to come home to that's going to help ground them a little bit. They might, let's say, have a family that goes to church and they might not be in it, but they're going to go. And eventually, hopefully they'll connect with God and get that moving and grooving. A lot of guys that do have spouses come home and they have issues because I think a lot of those issues spur from that excitement, that aliveness. And when you get home, it's kind of boring.
Yeah.
You know, you're not literally living in every single moment of every single hour of every single day like you are out there. And you're on, I mean, have you ever been, I mean, for the viewers that have never seen combat, I would say like when you're on a roller coaster ride and you're going down that big, I mean, it's slowly going up and the anticipation, and then all of a sudden you're going down and around and all, I mean,
you're not thinking about paying your bills or, you know, things like that when that's going on, right?
There is literally no thought in your mind other than like what's going on right then and right there. And for some people, you don't want to be in it, but you have no choice because you're locked in until the ride's over, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's literally, it's a thrill ride, but it's combat and it's real. It's not a carnival. It's not a fair. I mean, this is a real deal where you literally see people bleed. You see people die. You literally see life leave. I mean, that is something that most 19-year-olds shouldn't see. And then when you come home to a society that doesn't necessarily know, other than the other combat veterans that do know, but you don't want to talk to those guys because they'll trigger you by just talking about it.
Really?
So it's kind of like you're caught in a predicament, so to speak, because for me, I wanted to talk about my experiences, but I didn't know who to talk about it with. I couldn't talk to my mom, my dad, my brother. They don't know how to relate to it. They can try, but they're not going to be able to. And so I don't mean to speak on behalf of all combat vets, but for me personally, I think what I experienced coming home and not being in that thrill seat, not literally living in that every moment of every hour of every week kind of a thing. I did have an outlet, and it was Wings for Warriors. And I'm not encouraging other veterans coming home, oh, you need to represent a nonprofit. But there's 40,000 veteran nonprofits in America. Wings for Warriors is just one of them. I like to tell people we're a small organization that's made a very big impact. And if other veterans out there need to be a part of something, need to be part of a new tribe, so to speak. Have you ever read Any of Sebastian Junger's books?
I've heard of him. I have not though.
Oh,
Yeah.
fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely heard of him.
Little shout out to my man, Sebastian. Great books, but
Really?
so being a part of a tribe is really important. That camaraderie, that sense of purpose, that sense of value, that meaning that you get out of being in a tribe, being in a part of a community. I kind of created my own organically and naturally, not realizing Wings for Warriors was going to save me from a very, very dark place. I tell people all the time, Wings for Warriors might have helped a little over 5,000 people across the United States, but it helped this one the very most.
That's awesome. So do you think that's like the main reason? I don't know what, you probably know this stat better than me. I don't know if it's one a day or 1 hour as far as like the suicides of veterans. Is that the main like issue? Would you say for them coming back is not being able to like transition into some sort of like civilian life?
I mean, yeah, it's a science, and I think psychologists out there, military health, I think they're all trying to figure out a way, like, can we nail down, tackle down the science behind the guys coming home into society and live with their mortal injuries, live with depression, suicidal tendencies, homicidal tendencies, because they're trained killers. Mm-hmm. Let's not forget, America's finest are really good at killing.
Yeah, and we got that part down.
We can talk about that again. That's getting political. I'll keep it out, but that's part of it, is that they're trained to fight, right? And that the fight in Afghanistan, they're not. We weren't allowed to fight the way we're trained to fight. Otherwise, Afghanistan would have been a year or less. If
really,
we,
you say that?
Hands down. I guess I can get.
They hold people back. Is that what you're saying? As far as like
rules of engagement.
Oh, okay.
So, I think it's a problem too, because the guys come home and they're like, God, I lost a limb because I wasn't able to like do my job. And they're fighting for political reasons that aren't necessarily their own personal beliefs, but they sign the dotted line. It can be anybody. Any of us can get hurt. Any of us can go overseas and fight in a war or conflict. But it's these wars and conflicts that these guys are in. They're not able to do their job successfully, meaning rule out the enemy, rule out the target, because that's what we're trained to do. And then we come home and we're like, oh, So I think there's a lot of guys that struggle with that. And it adds to like a layer of depression. It adds a variable of, I don't know what word you want to use. Am I making sense, or am I rambling?
Like
it makes sense to me.
Life. Yeah,
kind of melancholy maybe.
Saying, yeah. So
in my unit, and I don't mean to get back to 2-7, but when we came home, 30 veteran suicides.
Yeah, that's crazy.
PTSD related, depressed. Some of them were depressed. Some were married with kids, some weren't. But
yeah, it's so sad to me to think that you've done your job and you've come back home and then you end up killing yourself. It's like, fuck, man. Like, that's so terrible, And like I said, like, we've got the training of, we can train people to, be these warriors and these fighters, but you would think they'd have the same amount of money put into how do we psychologically transition these people to come back home and be normal, halfway sane individuals, So,
again, for me personally, finding Christ again and working on my relationship with Jesus Christ and God, just my overall Christian walk, my Christian faith, it saved me. I have my wife and my kids to thank for that.
Yeah.
And I'm no saint. Every day's got its battle, right?
Yeah.
Every day's got its own little battles, but you pick them, you choose them, and my little tribe is my wife and my 4 kids.
Yeah.
That's my tribe. My tribe is Wings for Warriors. My tribe are other Christians trying to get through life in community, and that's what saved me. It took a while to,
I just had a question. I was going to wait to your end, but I was going to say, the Wings for Warriors, does that also not just help the veterans coming back home, but does it also help with the family members? Because you did say your wife and kids were your savior, but did they too have to kind of understand what to expect and how to take in these PTSD that you're speaking of, the chronic pain, whatever, how to approach that? Because I know there might be some family out there that's like, this is not
How do you deal with it? Is that what you're saying?
It's kind of like, how do you get the family also to be in the same
That's a good question, I think.
same level of treatment? Because they too have to be recovering with you, not like, okay, well, I'm good, I don't know what's wrong with him, like that kind of thing. So does Wings of Warriors also have something like that for the family members of those?
That's a great question. So Wings for Warriors, we have several programs. I know we touched on healthcare benefits, financial benefits. That's, like I said, I'm not necessarily saying it's slowing down, but it's not as needed as it once was. Yeah. We also have another program that's helping unite military families with their loved ones, with their healing heroes, is what we like to call them. And these wounded warriors need support systems. I think when they come home from the battlefield, that the Wings for Warriors, we have like a travel assistance program where warriors and families can fly and see each other to be each other's support system. And so a lot of the volunteers over the years have been other military spouses that have been there, done that, meaning they've walked the walk with their wounded warrior or wounded loved one, so that now they're volunteering and helping with another wounded warrior's spouse or a family. And then something else that we also work with, because of the level of injuries that these guys can come home with, or gals, that there's so many resources out there that these military families and caregivers don't even know where to begin. And that's where Wings for Warriors can help step in and kind of guide them in that transitional process.
That's awesome. That's amazing. So I know you had mentioned before, I think before we were mic'd up here, you kind of have another passion project that you have going on now aside from Wings for Warriors. So can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
What that is exactly?
So the same corpsman that I was referring to, his name's Edwin Daniel. He actually became a business partner of mine a handful of years ago. His family started up a little business, and I was honored to be a business development director for them and helping them out a little bit. But mainly, it was just through those conversations that led to one main conversation, like, hey, like, we had our distance from each other for a while. Like, we had an idea to start a business, and it was kind of like a side hustle. And he was a board member with Wings for Warriors too, at one point in time. But we had a conversation at a sports bar here in Phoenix, and I just said, it'd be kind of cool to create a consulting firm with you, and it'd be a boutique consulting firm, just a few people, just me, you, and a few others. And it's a way to keep in communication with one another, and it's a way for me to scratch your back and you to scratch mine, or we can just let it sit like a sitting duck and not do anything with it at all. So after that conversation, just a few short months later, this is back in 2017, my buddy Doc Daniel and I decided to co-found Taylor&Lawrence, which is a boutique consulting firm that has subcontracting capabilities. And right now we've been just doing our due diligence and studying really just the industry of subcontracting and where it may or may not go with regards to our business, Taylor&Lawrence.
So what does that mean exactly for people who don't know anything about what does that mean? Subcontracting and
the federal,
helping develop businesses. Yeah,
the federal government has millions and millions and millions of dollars. Okay. And they like to offer those, they have contracts that companies can bid on certain contracts. And let's say one contract is this particular VA hospital in Cincinnati, Ohio needs 300 gurneys and 300 monitors for their patients in rooms. And then you have hundreds, if sometimes probably even thousands of companies bidding on particular contracts. And let's say you had a whole bunch of companies that focus on healthcare and they saw that contract, they wanted to bid on it. Taylor&Lawrence can be rewarded that particular contract, and we would essentially be finding another company to handle the logistics of it all. Yeah. We would in essence be a project manager, and really everyone's happy. It's a win-win.
So is that something you found that you really enjoy doing, is like this process of like building like a business or an organization and kind of like seeing that all come together? Because I know you sent me that article. I don't know if you want to talk about that at all. When you texted me that article, and it was just about, basically like social media and how the power of having, building this brand. I mean, that's basically like the future. I think too, for a lot of people. I mean, that's why I love doing this, is like, it's like this whole new world of like possibilities. And I know, do you do speaking as well? Is that something like you're interested in like doing more of, and like maybe more in like a social media type realm?
I don't know if it's going to be social media, and thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. So after founding Wings for Warriors and co-founding Taylor&Lawrence and just being kind of like, I don't know, business minded, so to speak. And I'm all self-taught. Like I'm not like some business guru that read a bunch of books and, went to a Tony Robbins conference and was like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. No, I mean, I literally just I'm just living life, man. And I don't see myself as a corporate America type guy. And if someone's watching this later and they're looking at my resume and I did apply for a job, please just rewind and disregard. But I really don't see myself working for corporate America. It's just not me. And so, I'm just kind of monetizing off of, let's say, something that God allowed. I stepped on a bomb. I was in the midst of combat. And I tell people, from the battlefield to the boardroom, Anthony Doc Ameen, that's just who I am. It's like, I'm telling my story a lot. And over the years, I've been featured in the media. And, I've been blessed with a lot of experiences telling my story, right? And so the last 10 years, a lot of my keynotes have been to get a sponsorship or a donation. And I'm still doing just that. But now I want to tell my story in a way that really impacts a big crowd. I want to really impact people with my Christian faith. I want to see if I can spark a little change in someone else's life with inspirational keynotes, motivational keynotes to get some corporation really revved up for like a big campaign they're about to boost. There's a lot of church congregations out there that don't want to listen to the same pastor every week give something. Yeah. Have a little guest speaker come and kind of add a little flair to the congregation and have them leave with something different than their weekly message from their pastors. And that's just kind of my new little mission right now. And it's been a blessing to work with people like you and all the others over the years. And just relationships alone is what I like the most of my career. And I do like to talk. But my point...
That's why you're great at this, man. You're great at podcasting.
Well, thanks.
Do you know who Jocko, Willink? Well, yeah. He got into that through, I think, going on like Joe Rogan. He's friends with Joe Rogan, but now he does all sorts of like, I think he's written books and he does speaking engagements and he has like a podcast. But I think that stuff is fascinating, especially from your perspective, because I don't know that much about that world that you lived in. And to have somebody who's good at, like unfolding that story. I mean, I think that's beautiful.
They say like, tell it how it is. And like, if you know something, own it and tell it. So like I'm owning my story of going from Afghanistan till now, from the battlefield to the boardroom. And now I'm working on a little book series. It's the Suck series. I'm not going to spell out the acronym for everyone out there, but I've got 3 little books I'm working on. Nonprofit Suck, a love letter to future founders. Marriages Suck, a love letter to future husbands. And Kids Suck, a love letter to future fathers. And then...
that's cool, man. I like that.
My overall story is being shopped around right now with some of the major publishers. And I'm, again, blessed to have all these experiences. If I used to go into let's say an audience, and I'm like, okay, if I can get 1 donation, 1 sponsorship, I've done my job today. Now I want to hold that microphone, look into the crowd and be like, if I can turn one person's heart over to God, I've done my job today. And that's my new mission in life right now. I still got Wings for Warriors and Taylor&Lawrence, but the keynote thing is really what I'm hoping to get more of, because I can impact more people that way.
That's awesome. So do you think, again, do you think you'll kind of try to develop more of like a social media presence, maybe for your own like that type of thing, your own speaking and things like that you're going to try to develop? Or is that still kind of, because you don't want to get into is that too personal, Because for me, personally for me, like doing this, like at first, when I first started doing this, I didn't have any social media accounts for myself. And like, I'm a pretty private person, but again, like you, like I love talking to people. So like for me, it just keeps getting better and better. And it's like, I hated social media for like the longest time.
Can I ask you why? I want to ask you questions too. Yeah. This hasn't been fair. I don't know how much time we have, but I wanted to ask you, like, why don't you like social media? And then like, why aren't you on there? Because I think a few days back I said, hey, what channels are you on?
Yeah, you did. Yeah, well, I think people have to remember is like this whole, like the internet in this whole time period that we're in right now, like this is so new, you know, like in the you know, period of like human existence, like this is also new. So it's like for me, like when it first came out, all this stuff, like I had Facebook for like a year, but I just thought it was so like superficial for the longest time. And a lot of it for the most part was like social media when it first came out. Like it was all people trying to, you know, pretend that they have this sort of lifestyle and they have this going on. But I think as it's progressing, it's starting to get more like real. Like you have like things like Joe Rogan, which I love. And I mean, he's like
real.
Yeah, exactly.
Jocko Willink's real.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, I'm real.
Exactly.
I'm not pretending to be anything that I'm not.
Yeah.
It's those pretenders. It's the fake it till they make it. Oh, they drive me nuts.
Which are bad,
and I don't want people to think that I'm that guy.
Yeah.
And I don't think you want people to think you're that guy. You know, but
Yeah.
there are people that literally own being that person.
I know. And they do well too. They like there's people who are
I said sometimes you do feel like if you dabble a little bit in another social media platform that you might come to that. And I'm like, no, you won't, because you know you don't want that.
I think it's important to like to set boundaries. Like I do, like I am not on social media 24/7, you know? So I think as I get more into it, it's just important to be aware of like how much time you're spending staring at a screen or like checking your Instagram or whatever it is. And I think people are getting better at it, you know?
Here's my routine.
Yeah,
What'd you just say? Boundaries, right?
Yeah.
So here are my boundaries. I didn't always have them, but up until like, I'd say like the last year, because last year I cranked out a 4-year degree in healthcare management.
Really?
I did a fast track program with Ottawa University. It was a great experience, and thank God it's over.
Yeah.
But I think for that, I had to get really disciplined and fine tune those boundaries with social media. So like in the mornings, I'm a breakfast guy. I like to, when I'm at breakfast, that's my spiritual time too. I like to read the Bible. I like to read some articles, you know, of like entrepreneurial related type stuff. I kind of get my readings in. That's all on Twitter. So that's kind of like my overall Twitter experience. And we're looking at maybe 15, 20 minutes tops. And then maybe throughout the day, some scripture will hit me and I'm like, I'm going to find like a cool image that has that scripture on it. And I'll put it out there to the world but it's all on Twitter. LinkedIn, it's mainly business stuff, but I used to have LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook all simultaneously getting the same stuff. But over the course of time, like certain social media outlets or channels, so to speak, call for certain types of media engagement. So you don't want to post the same stuff on Twitter that you are on Facebook and LinkedIn. You want it to all be a little bit different. And it's hard when you're like a guy like me and you're
busy. Yeah.
Well, it's like a personal brand. I hate to even say that term, but it is. I'm trying to boost and build a personal brand off of brands that help boost me, like Wings for Warriors, Taylor&Lawrence. Now I'm trying to boost my own little image. And again, I don't want to come across as that
douchey.
You said it, I didn't, but I don't want to be a douchebag.
Yeah.
I don't want to be that, hey, fake it till you make it kind of a guy, because I'm not having to fake anything.
Check this out. I mean, for me, it's like I think the first people who are most successful and adopted it the most quickly as far as social media were people, honestly, that were probably a little bit narcissistic, and people that did want to post something about themselves all the time and constantly. And those were people who gained a bunch of subscribers. But it's like I said, I think now they're starting to get more like genuine people that are gaining, you know, this audience. And it's like, I really do think like, like normal, like in the next decade, like things are going to be totally turned on their head as far as like normal, you know, like news outlets and things like that people like engage with, because there's so many things like just on YouTube alone that are just really well put together and really well done. And there's not like this huge team of people behind it that are trying to push this, you know, one agenda. It's like somebody that is passionate about this thing and they're putting out their honest, you know, whatever.
I agree with you. Yeah. 100%. 100%. I think a lot of times too in showbiz or, you know, Hollywood, you've got people that come from money or that come from fame, and they didn't really have to do much to get there. They just kind of grew up in the spotlight. And I'm not going to name any names. I mean, we can play that game all day, but you know, just being a humble Christian here. Yeah. I think that, I think ultimately there are some up and coming people that have real life stories with substance that people want to hear, and they like that character. They like that person. They're not faking anything. They're real. They're authentic. But I don't know. I just hope that as this little personal brand thing develops into something and blossoms, I hope that you guys out there don't think that I'm some douche.
Huh. Well, man, I'm so glad that this like totally randomly, happened.
Totally random.
And I'll be interested to watch, what you're doing, and I'd love to do this again, whatever, in a year or 6 months, and kind of, it'd be fun to see, see what's going down.
His book is released.
There you go.
There you
Yeah.
go. No,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm hoping to be done in 2020. The big book, I don't know. I've been wrestling with that for a year or so, but it's all God's timing. It'll happen when it's ready.
That's how I do this, man. It's literally like one guest at a time. Yeah, like I'll meet somebody. Stephanie will. Yeah.
Are we still?
Yeah, we're still
Yeah. I have some questions for
you.
you.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
Because for people listening, I think it's important because like I didn't know anything about you, but I'm glad I do now, and now I want to tell other people about it. So like, what type of interviewees or interview subjects do you want moving forward? In like, like entrepreneurs, politicians, or a little bit of everybody.
Yeah, man. Honestly, I mean, I'm interested in everything. I'm interested in talking to people who are like really passionate about whatever it is that they know. So it's like there's a range of different people that I've talked to. I mean, the last guest I had on here was fucking John McAfee. I mean, the guy is like totally off the wall, but you cannot deny that he's an interesting person. So it's like I don't necessarily have to agree with everything that people that come on say. I'm just interested in talking to people that are really genuine and they're real about what they're talking about. So I'll talk to anybody.
He also, it's more of hearing their viewpoints and just trying to understand why would someone like this be passionate. It's giving them that platform, like, giving them that opportunity to be like, this is why I believe. We may disagree with it, we may agree with it or whatever, but it's giving them the opportunity, like, this is what this person believes and this is why. And this is why Austin likes, I don't know how he finds them, but they come to him. Something about it, he even got Leon.
Yeah. This Netflix dude.
Yeah.
Oh.
I just love the art of the conversation. That's why I think like it's so relaxing, and for me it's nice to mix things up from, watching Netflix or whatever, to be able to like I'll put on a Rogan podcast and they're like, I won't necessarily listen to the 2 hours right then and there, but it's just nice to have this different form, like slow things down, and
it was relaxing. I caught myself cussing a couple of times. Sorry, Mom.
I love podcasting, man. And I love talking to people, and I'll talk to anybody,
Well, thanks again for having me.
Yeah,
man. It's been a pleasure. Yeah,
thank
it really
you, man. All right, beautiful. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and that's it. We'll see you next time. Adios.